Donald Trump says the economic result of NAFTA has been very unfair to the United States. How do you respond to that?
I believe that we need to share more information to get a better assessment of NAFTA benefits for the U.S. As you know, basically Mexico is the second largest buyer of U.S. commodities and manufacturing. And the reality is that many strategic sectors in the U.S. depend on NAFTA, in the agro industries and in the manufacturing industries as well. Sometimes when you look at numbers, they help you to understand better the realities of this. For instance, when NAFTA was signed, and if you look at manufacturing jobs, they remain very constant through the years. They changed drastically in 2001 when China comes into the world trading system. But that happens to most of the countries that have to face a new competitors like China. Now, when you look at manufacturing in the U.S., manufacturing has been growing up in terms of value. From 1997 to 2015, the U.S. value of manufacturing grew by 38% in real terms. What has been going down is employment because of technological development and the competition with other regions in the world.
Well, we know, given what's been said, that Mexicans are very upset with the President of the United States. Is there political support in Mexico for a renegotiation of the treaty?
I believe that in Mexico, the treaty itself has been a very efficient tool to improve U.S.-Mexico relationships. You are aware that through history, the U.S.-Mexico relationship had not been very strong. But fortunately, thanks to NAFTA, the views in Mexico has changed drastically in the last 24, 25 years. And today, Mexicans feel part of a very strong North American neighborhood. And we feel very close to the U.S. people. And I believe many of us, we study in U.S. universities. A lot of American tourists come to Mexico. There are strong bonds between Mexicans and U.S. Citizens. Now, we are responsible that these very good relations continues in the future. And one of the elements that we have to defend is our economic integration.
Well, what happens to the Mexican economy if Trump should pull out of NAFTA?
Before you enter into any dialogue to change an agreement, which means you have to renegotiate that agreement, you better make sure that you have a safety net, a fallback position. And scenario B, or alternative scenario for Mexico, is that we have to be ready if there is no way to get a good agreement for Mexico. And that will be, the fallback will be to stick to our commitments in WTO, the World Trade Organization. And that, the meaning of that for us, what will it be? For instance, our main exports to the U.S. is cars. If we don't have NAFTA, the tariffs that we'll be paying on cars will be 2.5%. As a matter of fact, when you look at the whole universe of trade, without NAFTA, in terms of the bound rates the U.S. has committed to WTO, 40% of what we export to the U.S. will go in zero tariffs. 37% will pay anywhere from 0 to 5%. And just very few items will be subject to higher tariffs. Like, for instance, pickup trucks. Those will be subject to 25%. And that will be highly damaging because we export $18 billion of pickup trucks to the U.S.
Well, is there a good chance of a trade war then between the U.S. and Mexico?
You never engage in a new dialogue with the idea in your mind to go into a trade war. That will be a lose-lose proposition for both nations. You rather engage in a very propositive view, trying to move forward an agreement that will benefit Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. Now, obviously, you have to have also the option that if things don't go well, you have to have an alternative strategy. Hopefully, we will not have to engage in any type of trade wars.
Well, has the Trump threat caused a rethink of the Mexican economic model? Perhaps you've been too close to the U.S., too reliant on trade between the U.S. and Mexico?
Let me tell you that from the beginning of the presidency of Enrique Peña Nieto, the president of Mexico, we have been instructed as trade negotiators to diversify Mexican connection to the world. We, very early in this administration, we engaged with the Europeans to start modernizing and renegotiating the Mexico-European agreement. Right now, we are trying to finish our broadened, deeper agreement with Europe by the end of this year. We also, obviously now is not very popular, but we finished the negotiation of TPP, and we were about to do a new era of relationship with Asia, and we finished Alianza Pacifico, which is a very strong initiative for Latin America and the Pacific. And right now we are negotiating with Brazil and Argentina over a widening of trade preferences, because we need to have an alternative supply just in case things don't go well with the new U.S. administration.
Well, can you come up with a different economic model? Do you need to come up with a different economic model of not just with whom you trade, but what you make and what you sell?
What I will definitely agree with you is not a new economic model, but we have to deepen and accelerate our actions towards being more competitive. You have very good examples in the world of countries like Germany. They are in the middle of Europe, and obviously they engage very strongly with Europe, but they can survive even with the trade they do with other regions in the world. So Mexico has to follow very good examples of how to be efficient in terms of manufacturing, in terms of industrial process, to be more competitive than what we are today, in order to be ready to diversify and lessen the dependence that we have today with the U.S. economy.
Last year, by U.S. accounting, Mexico had a $63 billion trade surplus with the United States. Donald Trump says that in and of itself is bad. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, you have to make, assuming that what you have to look at is trade deficit, which is not the only thing that you have to look at, because you have to look at the current account as an economist, because there are many other areas of interest of a country when you engage internationally. First of all, you should not be worried about vis-a-vis trade deficits. You should be worried about your overall integration to the global economy, because today the world does not trade in final goods. We trade in production processes. We exchange inputs for global value change. So in that way, sometimes you need to have a deficit with some countries, because that supports your competitiveness to offer to other regions in the world. And now, on the other hand, you have to also look at the service balances. For instance, the strength of the U.S. economy is in patents, in trademarks, in things that are not goods by themselves, but are very strong advantages of the U.S. economy. We have a lot of patents. We pay for patents. We pay for trademarks. We pay for financial services. So our deficit with the U.S. in services is more than $10 billion. Now, if you add the purchase that Mexicans do on the border, and in very important cities like Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Miami, New York, that counts for $30 billion. So together, our trading on balance in services plus what we buy and is not registered in the trade account, basically there is nothing to worry about our trade balance.
Has the Trump administration, have any officials told you what they want in a renegotiation?
As you know, the rules that govern today, basically the ability for newcomers in the administration to talk to foreign officials is regulated by very strong laws. So I have not talked to Mr. Ross because he has not been ratified by the Senate. I had the chance to visit the White House, and I have a meeting with Peter Navarro, the new chief of trade advisory to the White House. And by following up his interviews and by following up the hearings of Mr. Ross, you get a sense that there is a way where we can find a landing pad, how to strengthen regional content in North America and to bring back some of the investment that we let go in the past to other regions in the world. So I think that there is a way to find a very good agreement that will be a win-win for the three countries in NAFTA.
Well, you have mentioned giving Donald Trump some political victories to be able to sell back in the United States. Can you give me an example of what that might be?
For instance, any agreement has in itself rules of origin, which is the kind of regional content that you have to give to a product in order to be able to benefit from a special treatment in tariffs. That you can strengthen rules of integration. And if you do so, you create incentives for new investments in North America, which means new jobs for Americans. Even if a dollar comes back from other region to Mexico, by itself will reduce in 40 cents the U.S. deficit vis-a-vis the world, because Mexicans, we have a much higher propensity to consume U.S. goods than any other citizen in the world. Vis-a-vis, for instance, China, we have 10 times more marginal propensity to consume U.S. goods. For every dollar that we export, 40 cents out of American content.
As far as Mexico is concerned, does it have to be a three-way negotiation over NAFTA, or would Mexico be willing to accept bilateral treaties separately with the U.S. and with Canada?
I think that when you are talking about trade, and it was very well understood after our visit in Canada. I was with the Foreign Affairs Minister of Mexico, visiting Minister Christian Freeland in Toronto, and we had a very good bilateral meeting. And after that, she posted in her tweet, NAFTA is a trilateral agreement that has to be negotiated in trilateral terms, because there are 3 countries in NAFTA, and we should not risk losing the value chain integration that we are doing today in North America.
We talked about what the U.S. might want. What does Mexico want in a renegotiation?
Mexico, my president was very clear 2 weeks ago when he gave us mandates for this new dialogue with the U.S. Because remember, it's not just trade. There are too many things involved. He said this dialogue has to be integral, which means it's not just trade. It's migration, it's security, it's many other items. Now, for me, the trade negotiator, I boiled down the president's instruction, the president of Mexico instructions very clearly. 3 pillars. First of all, sitting down in this negotiating table, the 3 parties had to understand the realities of what NAFTA had meant for the North American region. Second, we have to be aware that after 22 years, NAFTA has been getting old. And there are too many new things in the world that we have to update in NAFTA, like electronic trade, telecom, IT, elements for energy. 22 years ago, the energy sector in North America was nothing close to what it is today. It's one of the most competitive energy sectors in the world. And also, the 3rd pillar of this negotiation has to be the understanding that the 3 of us have to have this chance to come back with a win for each country. Why? Because Mexico today, after 22 years, we have a very, very vibrant democracy. If I don't come back with a good agreement, my Senate, where my party doesn't have majority, will never approve it.
Well, you have talked about retaliatory tariffs. What might you target and how and why?
I am of the understanding that you could not use any type of threats or retaliation strategies before you start a good dialogue in the best terms possible. So I think this is not the time to start talking in a rhetoric of how you may get back for any kind of challenge that you will be facing. Let's wait and hope that this dialogue will be highly constructive for the 3 countries.
Jockeying to replace the U.S. As the trade leader in the Pacific already underway. You mentioned the Pacific Alliance. Do you see that as a possible replacement for TPP?
We are going to go for a meeting in Viña del Mar in Chile the next March 14. And we are trying to really put at the center of this discussion. We are meeting with TPP countries in this meeting. And the idea is to convince our Alianza Pacífico partners, Chile, Peru, and Colombia, to open the door for Alianza Pacífico and to welcome any country that wants to do a negotiation with Alianza Pacífico, any of the countries that were in TPP. Alianza Pacífico can become the alternative landing strip for TPP.
Do you see China as a potential major new trading partner for Mexico?
At this point in time, we have not had any kind of new discussions with China. We have widening and really increasing our trade relationship. President Peña has been getting really strategic relation with Xi Jinping, and we have opened the markets for Mexican commodities. The avocado rates have decreased. We have selling more avocados to China. We have been increasing our exports of tequila to China. We are getting more investment from China. But I still believe we are very similar economies in manufacturing, and therefore we are not like the profile that you have some of the Latin American countries like Brazil, where there are basically primary products nations in which they have a natural complementarity to China. Mexico, I believe, we in North America, we have much of a competitive profile.
You've mentioned Brazil as a potential trading partner. How fast could you ramp up trade? I mean, that is a country that is even more closed and has an economy without a lot of growth potential right now.
Definitely. I mean, Brazil is going through rough times economically, but we do believe that the Brazilian market is a very important market. We have a very strong relationship with them. We are basically trading more than $10 billion with the Brazilians. We see there a very, very high potential, but mostly right now Mexico, in terms of agro products, we are fully depending on the U.S. economy. Given the fact that we have to prepare for very uncertain times in this dialogue, we have to basically strengthen our relationship with Argentina and Brazil, because they are very highly productive in grains, foodstuff, wheat, corn, you name it, they have it.
One last question. When Donald Trump was elected, there was a lot of fear in Mexico about what might happen to the economy, and there were emergency plans being discussed with the government and with the central bank. But since then, the peso has strengthened. Mexican markets are up. Do you think that whatever crisis, whatever issues may come, have now been priced in and the sense of emergency is over?
Definitely, we started in a very rocky year. I had to return from my vacation on the first day of the year. I was outside of Mexico, and I came back because I knew that the treating activity was going to be very, very heavy, and I was not wrong. We got our first news about Ford not investing in Mexico, and it affected definitely the currency markets. Fortunately, I believe that today investors are looking at a much more strong facts in order to take action, and the Mexican peso has recovered. Obviously, the markets are still a bit shaky and uncertain about the future of the most important trade relationship for Mexico, but we do believe that markets are acting much responsible in terms of what they see as real policy and what they have been hearing lately in terms of how we can find very good grounds for good agreements in terms of trade.
Muchas gracias, Mr. Minister. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Mike.